So, there's only one bed. I stared at her. She stared at the bed. The bed just sat there, completely indifferent to the situation it was creating. I can see that, I said. We could call the front desk. It's 2 a.m, Lena. She turned to look at me, and something in the way she did it, slow, almost careful, made me forget what I was about to say next. Okay, she said finally. So, we share. Neither of us moved toward the bed. I want to tell you that what happened next was simple, that 2 friends shared a mattress for a few nights on a work trip, laughed about it, and went home unchanged. I want to tell you that, but I'd be lying. And I've been lying about this particular thing for long enough. Lena and I had been working together at the same architecture firm in Chicago for almost 3 years. We weren't best friends. I want to be clear about that, because the story sounds different if you think we were. We were work friends, the kind who grab lunch when no one else is free, the kind who text memes about unreasonable clients at 11 at night, the kind who know each other's coffee orders and cover for each other in meetings and somehow, gradually, become the person you look for first when you walk into a room, without ever consciously deciding that was going to happen. She was the kind of woman who made everything look slightly more interesting than it actually was. Not because she was flashy, she wasn't. She was the opposite of flashy. She wore the same 4 sweaters on rotation and held her pen between her teeth when she was thinking, and had this habit of going completely silent before she said something important, like she was building up to it from the inside out. I noticed these things the way you notice background music, constantly, without really registering that you're noticing. We'd been sent to Portland together for a client presentation. 4 days. Flights, meetings, a hotel that the company had booked in that particular way companies book hotels. With confidence and without confirmation, there was supposed to be 2 rooms. There was 1. The front desk clerk had explained it with the practiced calm of someone who had delivered this news before. A system error. The 2nd room had been released back into inventory. The hotel was at capacity. She was very sorry. I remember Lena turning to me in that moment with an expression I couldn't read. Not panic, not laughter, something in between that she tucked away quickly before I could get a good look at it. We said we'd figure it out. We always figured things out. That was the nature of us. We were 2 competent women in their early 30s who had never once failed to solve a practical problem. A shared hotel room was a practical problem. It had a practical solution. I told myself that in the elevator on the way up. I was still telling myself that when I saw the bed. 1 bed, queen-sized, perfectly made, sitting in the middle of the room with the absolute stillness of something that knows it's about to change everything. The first night was fine. That's the honest version. We'd been up since 4 a.m. to catch an early flight. By the time we got to the room, we were both so exhausted that the bed situation barely registered as anything beyond logistics. We brushed our teeth, divided the covers without discussion, said goodnight, and I was asleep within minutes. I woke up at some point in the dark and Lena was on her side facing away from me, completely still. The room was quiet. The curtains weren't quite closed and there was a pale orange strip of city light falling across the foot of the bed. I lay there for a moment, just listening to her breathe. And then I made myself stop doing that. I rolled over and stared at the ceiling and told myself, "You're tired. You're in a strange bed in a strange city and your nervous system is just doing what nervous systems do. It doesn't mean anything. Go back to sleep." I went back to sleep. The 2nd day was the presentation. It went well. Better than well, actually. Lena was extraordinary in the room. She always was. She had this way of talking about design that made clients feel like they'd been seeing the world wrong their entire lives, and she was the first person to hand them the right glasses. She never oversold. She never performed. She just told the truth about buildings in this calm, specific, devastating way, and people believed her immediately. Afterward, we went to dinner with the clients. Long dinner. Good wine. The kind of conversation that's easy and warm because the work went well and everyone is relieved. At some point, Lena laughed at something the senior partner said and I felt it before I heard it. This low surprise sound she makes when something actually catches her off guard, different from her polite laugh, more real, and I thought, I know that laugh. I can tell them apart, and then, why do I know that? On the walk back to the hotel, it was raining. Portland rain. Light and continuous, the kind that gets into everything slowly without ever feeling dramatic. We walked close because of the umbrella she'd had the foresight to bring, and I hadn't. Her shoulder was against mine for 6 blocks. I was aware of exactly where the fabric of her jacket ended and the air began. I told myself I was cold. I wasn't cold. That night she fell asleep before me. I lay on my side watching the ceiling, and I thought about the laugh I could identify, the sweaters I'd memorized, the way her voice changed when she was thinking versus when she was performing certainty for a room. The fact that when the presentation ran long and we were all starving, she'd quietly passed me half of the granola bar she'd pulled from her bag without asking if I wanted it, like she already knew the answer. I thought about the bed, about how I was acutely, specifically aware of the exact distance between my body and hers. I thought, this is fine. This is nothing. This is what happens when you're tired and far from home and everything is slightly disoriented. Then I thought, stop lying to yourself. You're not this bad at reading your own mind. I stared at the ceiling for a long time after that. The third day was harder. Not in any obvious way. Nothing happened that anyone watching from outside would have flagged as significant. We did the follow-up meetings. We walked through the project site in the afternoon with the junior architect who was managing the local team. We got coffee at a place Lena had found on her phone that turned out to actually be worth the walk in the cold, but something had changed in the quality of my attention, and I couldn't change it back. It was like I'd adjusted a dial and then lost the knob. Everything she did was too clear. The way she held her coffee cup with both hands. The way she crouched down to look at a detail in the foundation wall and her hair fell forward over her shoulder. The way she talked to the junior architect. Really talked to her, asked questions, remembered her name, treated her like a person who had things worth hearing. The way she said my name when she wanted to show me something. Just my name. Like the word itself was a complete sentence. We had a free evening. No dinner with clients. Nothing scheduled. We ended up at a bar near the hotel that neither of us had planned to go to. We'd just been walking, and it looked warm and lit and not too loud. We sat across from each other at a small table in the back, the kind of bar where they put a candle in a glass jar and the light it throws is amber and slightly unsteady. She told me about her family. I'd known her for 3 years, and she'd never told me about her family in any real way, just references, the way you refer to weather in a city you're not currently in. But that night she told me about growing up in upstate New York, in a house where everyone was loud except her. How she'd learned to go quiet when things got complicated because it was the only way to hear herself think. How she'd almost not become an architect. How she'd almost become something else entirely. A painter, she said, and then shook her head slightly like she was still slightly embarrassed about having wanted that. Do you miss it? I asked. The painting. She thought about it. Really thought. That silence she builds up to things with. Sometimes, she said. But I think I found another way to do the same thing. Just with buildings instead of canvas. I looked at her. I felt something open in my chest like a window, and then I looked away, picked up my glass, and changed the subject to something safe. That's what I did with it. I changed the subject. I'd gotten very good at changing the subject. Later, walking back to the hotel, the rain had stopped, and the streets were wet and reflected the lights of everything. She was talking about something. The presentation, the follow-up timeline, I don't even remember, and I was listening, but I was also watching her, the way she moved through the world, like she was exactly where she was supposed to be in it, and I thought, I am in serious trouble. Not the fun kind of trouble, the kind that sits in the center of you and doesn't move. Because here's the thing, I hadn't let myself say out loud, not even in the privacy of my own head until that moment on the wet sidewalk. I had felt this before. This exact specific flavor of attention, this inability to stop noticing, this particular warmth. I had felt it for women before, and I had always found a way to call it something else. Admiration, envy, a close friendship. The way certain people just have a presence that's compelling. I had a whole catalog of explanations I kept stocked and ready, and I'd been pulling from it for years, and I was very, very good at it. But standing there on that sidewalk, watching Lena walk through the reflected lights, I was so tired of the catalog. I was tired of reaching for something that would make this smaller than it was. In the room, we did what we'd been doing. Brushed teeth, divided covers, said goodnight. Except that night, I didn't fall asleep. I lay in the dark, and I could feel her 3 feet away, and I thought about the window that had opened in my chest at the bar, and I thought about all the times I'd changed the subject, in this relationship and in others. And I thought, what are you waiting for? What exactly do you think you're protecting? At some point. I don't know what time. Late, the city had gone quiet. She shifted, turned over, and I heard her say, very quietly, into the dark, "Are you awake?" I closed my eyes, even though she couldn't see my face. "No," I said. She was quiet for a moment. "Me neither," she said, and we lay there in the dark, both of us awake, neither of us saying it. But before we go further, if you made it here, you already know this feeling. That specific moment when you're lying in the dark and you know exactly what's happening and you're still trying to pretend you don't. Hit the like button right now. It takes 2 seconds and it helps me keep bringing stories like this one to you. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe and turn on the bell. That way YouTube lets you know when a new story drops here on the channel. Now tell me in the comments, have you ever been in a moment where you knew what you felt and still chose not to say it? What made you hold back? Type it for me. I read every single one. And tell me, what city are you watching from? I'll mark it with a heart. Now, back to the story. The 4th day was the last day. Flight home at 8 in the evening. We had the morning free, a final check-in lunch with the client team, and then we were done. Back to Chicago, back to the office, back to being the version of ourselves that existed in a context with parameters and roles and the safe, comfortable distance of a work relationship that had never been complicated. I woke up before her. This had become its own kind of ritual over the 4 days. I'd lie there, awake, not moving, listening to her breathe and watching the light change in the gap between the curtains and not doing anything with any of it. Just holding it, like holding water in cupped hands and knowing you're going to have to let go. She woke up slowly. She was always slow in the mornings. Not groggy. She didn't get groggy, just quiet. She'd lie still for a minute, eyes open before she became fully herself again. That morning she lay still and I knew she was awake and she knew I was awake and neither of us said anything. Then she said, "I've been thinking." I didn't answer. I was calculating exits. "About last night," she said, "about both of us being awake. We were tired," I said. My voice came out too even. I'd practiced even. Even was the voice of someone who had everything organized. "Yeah," she said. She paused. "I don't think that's what it was, though." I stared at the ceiling. "Lena, I'm not trying to make this complicated. It's already complicated. Is it?" I didn't answer that. I couldn't answer that in a way that was also true. She sat up. I could feel the shift in the mattress, the subtle redistribution of weight. I didn't look at her. I was still doing the math, still running the calculations about what was safe and what wasn't, and what I could put back in the catalog and what had simply gotten too large for the catalog to contain. "I've been paying attention to you for a long time," she said. Her voice was careful, not careful like someone being cautious, careful like someone who has thought about this and decided to mean it. I didn't know what to do with it for a long time either. I turned my head and looked at her. She was sitting up, legs crossed, hands in her lap, looking at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Not the professional calm, not the work version of her, something quieter and more unguarded, something that looked like the courage it takes to stop pretending. "I've been changing the subject," I said, "for a really long time." "I know," she said. "I've watched you do it." That hit me somewhere specific. "Why didn't you say something?" She smiled. Small, real. The one she uses when something actually gets through. "Because," she said, "you needed to get there yourself. I wasn't going to drag you somewhere you weren't ready to go." I sat up. We were facing each other now, the morning light coming through the curtain gap, the bed between us carrying 3 nights of this exact weight. I thought about the catalog. Oh no, all those years of the catalog. All the times I'd found a different name for something that kept having the same name. All the subject changes, all the exits, all the careful architecture of not saying. And I thought about how tired I was. "I'm ready," I said. It was barely a sentence. It was more like something I let fall. She looked at me for a moment. "Yeah," she said softly. "I can see that." She reached over and took my hand. Nothing more than that. Just her hand covering mine on the covers between us. Warm, steady, like she'd been planning to do it for a while and had just been waiting for the right time. I didn't change the subject. We didn't miss the flight. I want to be clear about that because the story sounds a certain way and I want to give you the actual truth, which is unglamorous and real and better because of it. We held hands for a few minutes. We talked. We checked out of the hotel at noon and went to lunch with the clients and sat next to each other at the table, and I was aware of her elbow an inch from mine, in the way I would be aware of it for a very long time. On the flight home, we sat together. We'd had separate seats booked, also a company miscommunication, one of several on this trip that I was starting to feel was the universe operating with intent. And the flight was full, but the woman in the middle seat between us offered to swap when she heard us talking just to be closer to the window, she said. She probably didn't know what she was handing us, a middle seat, an absence of distance. Lena fell asleep on my shoulder somewhere over Wisconsin. I stayed awake, not because I was calculating anything, not because I was trying to figure out what to call it or whether it fit into a category I'd previously approved, just because I was awake and she was asleep and I wanted to be present for it. That particular small, quiet, ordinary thing of someone trusting you enough to rest against you. That was when I understood what I'd been protecting myself from. Not the feeling, not what it meant. I'd always known both of those things. What I'd been protecting myself from was this. The moment it became real. The moment there was no more subject to change to. The moment the catalog was retired permanently and I was just a woman on a plane. 32 years old with another woman asleep on her shoulder and nothing between me and the fact of it. It didn't feel like falling. That's the thing they don't tell you. I'd always imagined it would feel like falling. Terrifying and vertiginous and out of control. It felt like something else. It felt like the moment you've been holding your breath for a very long time and you finally exhale. Like something that had been braced for impact finally standing down. We landed. Baggage claim. The cold, ordinary fluorescent lights of O'Hare. We stood by the carousel with everyone else and waited for our bags, and I kept thinking, this is it. This is the part where the real world comes back in. The office, the colleagues, the clients who will send follow-up emails in the morning. The version of myself that I've been performing for years that fits into all the right boxes. She turned to look at me while we waited. So, she said. So, I said. Are you scared? I thought about it. Actually thought about it, instead of answering with the easy version. A little, I said. But not of this. I'm scared of all the time I wasted not being here. She nodded slowly, the way she nods when something lands. We're here now, she said. Her bag came around on the carousel. Mine came right after it. We pulled them off side by side. We walked out of baggage claim into the cold Chicago night, and she hailed the cab, and we got in and gave 2 different addresses because we live in 2 different neighborhoods, and this was real life where things are inconvenient and imperfect, and nothing happens the way it does in stories. And she took my hand in the back of that cab, and I let her. And it cost me something. The version of myself that had been very safe and very organized, and very skilled at not wanting things that scared her. But everything worth having cost something. And this was the first time I'd been asked to pay a price I was genuinely glad to pay. 3 months later, I told my sister. She looked at me with the expression of someone who has been waiting for information to confirm a theory they've held for a very long time. I know, she said. What do you mean you know? I mean I've always known. We all kind of knew. I stared at her. What does we all mean? She just smiled and refilled her wine. I called Lena afterward and told her. She laughed that laugh, the real one, the surprised one, for a long time. That's the part of the story that isn't about the hotel room or the shared bed or the 4 days in Portland. That's the part that came after. The part where I stopped building architecture around something that needed to breathe and started letting it take up the space it had always been trying to occupy. I still work at the same firm. She still works at the same firm. We are very professional about it in meetings. We are slightly less professional about it at lunch. The clients loved the Portland project. They hired us for the next one. We requested a room with 2 beds just to see what the universe would do. It gave us 1 bed again. We were not surprised. We did not spend much of that night sleeping either. But that, honestly, is a different kind of story. I finally had the thing I'd spent years building very careful walls around, not because it was easy. Not because the world handed it to me, because I got tired of being good at avoiding my own life. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is stop pretending you don't already know. If this story reached you somewhere real, type brave in the comments. That's how I know you made it all the way here with me. And if you want more stories like this one, stories that feel like something true, click the video appearing on your screen right now. A big hug, and I'll see you in the next one.